So what's up, everyone? Hockey time here yet again. Long time no see. As promised in the power rankings earlier, wanted to get you guys my Stanley Cup playoff bracket prediction for this year. I haven't really prepped any notes for this. Obviously, I have some thoughts on each of these series, but kind of just going to wing it. So you guys are going to get my live thoughts on this. And yeah, let's get started. We're going to go west to east first here. So Dallas taking on Vegas. One of the hardest series to call right up front. Obviously, Dallas winning the Western Conference in Vegas. The defending Stanley Cup champions are going to be getting a lot of their currently injured guys back, and they've recently gotten back guys like Tomas Hertl, relatively recently Jack Eichel, Aiden Hill, etc. So it to me is a real tough series to judge. The one thing that I'm hearing a lot from a lot of people is that a lot of commentary on Aiden Hill, and I personally don't know that I expect him to be starting game one. I think Logan Thompson has been dramatically better down the stretch again, injury aside. But I would be kind of surprised not to see him in game one. I know Aiden Hill won the cup for them last year, but I don't think the edge in goaltending is as wide as people think it's going to be between Hill and Ottinger versus Thompson and Ottinger. So we'll see. I could be very wrong. It could be Hill. And then, of course, my argument here is completely null and void. But all this to still say, I think Dallas wins this series. They're one of, if not the most well-rounded teams in the entire league. Their only real weakness on this team is like kind of depth at defense. And then if Jake Ottinger's not good, we've seen what Jake Ottinger looks like when he's not good, but it's not any different than any other NHL goalie when they're not good. So all in all, very, very hard to bet against this Dallas team. And it's going to be a war of a series. I mean, whatever team comes out of this is going to be bruised and battered. Vegas definitely has the size battle won. One of the best decors put together strictly for playoff hockey. And of course, adding Noah Hannafin to that makes it even harder to beat them, but I do think Dallas has what it takes to get through. The other half of this division, another incredibly hard series to call here. There's a lot of back and forth about, the Jets are probably the favorite in a lot of scenarios. They have the better goalie, arguably similar. I mean, the Avs have them beat on defense, but I don't think it's as wide a margin as a lot of people might think. And then up front, they just have so much depth. But I have such a hard time betting against Nathan MacKinnon, especially after this Avs team got beat in the first round last year. So this has been a really tough series to call. I've been thinking about this one a lot throughout the day in preparation for this video, but I still don't really know exactly who I want to go with. I think I'm leaning more toward the Jets. Now, again, I've just talked about how hard it's going to be to shut down McKinnon, to shut down McCarr, to shut down Rantanen, but I think at the end of the day, we've seen Georgiev struggle a lot over the last couple of weeks, and on the opposite end of the rink, they have the very likely Vezina Trophy winning Connor Hellebuck, who, when he is on his game, is one of, if not the best goalies in the world, and is definitely the best goalie in the world coming into these playoffs. So it's a tough one. I could very well see the Avs winning this, but I do think it's going to be Winnipeg here. Vancouver and Nashville. This is one of those series that a lot of people I think will probably go for the upset. And the more I think about it, the more I think I just need to not overthink it and go with Vancouver. Vancouver has more offensive depth, probably better defensive depth. I was listening to someone earlier talk about how they have Roman Yossi and Ryan McDonough, who are pretty much at any point going to be on the ice for the Preds. But I just don't know that that's going to be enough to stop this Canucks team. I think they are much more talented up front. Elias Pettersson, JT Miller getting back into the playoffs, I think that's going to be pretty dangerous. And people are not talking enough about Elias Lindholm, who is not historically a fantastic playoff player, but that's a very strong piece of depth for Vancouver that if he wakes up out of this slumber that he's been in the latter half of the season since being traded, they're a very scary team, and I don't think enough people are giving them credit. Partially because maybe it's just Vancouver. I do anticipate this being the best goaltending series of all of them between Demko and UC Saros. I think it's going to be a lot of low-scoring games, and it should be pretty entertaining if you're a fan of goaltending like me. So, nonetheless, I do have Vancouver coming out of this one. And then the last Western Conference series here, the Oilers taking on the LA Kings, the third time in the last 3 years that these teams meet each other in the first round. I don't think the result this year is going to be any different. I have Edmonton winning. As far as the game numbers go, I think this one's 7, this one's 7. Vancouver probably wins this in 6, and I think Edmonton probably wins it 5 or 6. I might even go 5, man. I mean, the Kings do not have the goaltending that they even had last year. Korpisalo, obviously not the name you'd expect to be giving them decent goaltending, but I thought he played decently in that series last year. And this year, relying very heavily on Cam Talbot. We saw what happened to Dave Riddick a few years back when he had to enter the playoffs. It did not go well for him. So, nonetheless, Oilers are the heavy favorite in that series, and I do think they're going to manage to get it done in maybe a more strong fashion than they have in years past. I think this Oilers team is built better than probably all the other ones that's been in the playoffs, so it'll be very interesting to see how far they can get. Heading back out east, we have the Panthers and the Bolts in the Battle of Florida. This is another one that I'm seeing a lot of people go back and forth on. But again, I think I'm just not going to overthink it. I think it's the Panthers. I think they're more built for the playoffs, which is weird considering how successful Tampa Bay has been in the playoffs. But the big difference between these Tampa Bay teams versus the Tampa Bay teams of years past is that the obvious one is Andre Vasilevsky has not had as good a year as he normally does, but the defense is completely different from the years where they won their cups and even the years they made it to the cup final and the year they had last year against Toronto. I mean, Victor Hedman has had a pretty dramatic drop off in his performance this season without Mikhail Sergachev to start the series and probably for the series. We'll see. I know he's skating, but I don't know what the true timetable on his return is. And from there, it's not a lot of guys that have a ton of NHL playoff experience, not a lot of guys that are known to be like big impact guys. So I don't have a ton of faith in Tampa Bay winning this. I do think it'll be a close series. These teams hate each other. I think it'll be very entertaining. But at the end of the day, I think Florida this year especially has had the edge in just about every category. And while Vasilevsky could always turn it on and become the terror that he's always been in the playoffs, I just think this Florida team has a lot of what it takes to make a pretty deep run, and that includes taking down this Tampa Bay team. The series that everyone's talking about, Boston and Toronto, I went back and forth on this one a bit too. Boston obviously swept the season series against Toronto. They've not lost a playoff series against Toronto since 1959. But I'm taking the Leafs in this one. And the reason for that, obviously, the Bruins have the edge in goaltending. The defense is probably tighter than people are assuming. I mean, the Bruins have it. Let's not kid ourselves here. But I just think that the Leafs have so much more firepower offensively. This is a team that earlier in the year there was conversations about their depth not being as good. I mean, they loaded up at the deadline last year. O'Reilly, Achari, Jake McCabe was a new addition at that point. They just had a ton of pieces. Sam Lafferty, one in Vancouver, who's been great that I'm completely spacing on. Much more intentional growth of depth heading into the playoffs last year. And this year, it was a lot of guys coming up from the Marlies and guys just developing within. Matthew Nyes, another year under his belt. Bobby McMahon has been fantastic for them. I think I don't know. I think the offensive depth for Toronto is going to overpower the defensive firepower that the Bruins have. It will be interesting. I think Jim Montgomery learned his lesson last year. I do think they're going to have that rotation rather than riding Linus Ullmark or Jeremy Swayman for a handful of games in a row. And maybe that changes things a lot. But I like the offense on this Leafs team way too much, and I think neither of these teams have good enough defense to really lock it down versus a team like say Colorado or Winnipeg, right? Or the Rangers, someone that has just a real abundance of defensive strength. I don't think either of these teams fit that bill. Frankly, I don't. A lot of people have been saying this, so I'm kind of tagging along for the ride here. I don't really think of either of these teams as favorites to win the cup. I think they're both kind of in that level just outside of it. So it's tough to. It's going to go 7 either way. Whatever way this series goes, it almost certainly ends in 7. But for me, I think the Leafs are going to take it. I think they're finally going to slay their proverbial dragon and get it done over the Bruins. The New York Rangers taking on my Washington Capitals. I would love to say I see an upset in this series. I really would. But I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, the Rangers have so much talent. They have 5 guys, I think, with more points than the leading point scorer for the Washington Capitals in Dylan Strome. They have Igor Shesterkin, who has his entire career been fantastic in the playoffs. I know Charlie Lindgren's been fantastic for the Caps. He's kind of dragged them into this playoff position, but as much as I would love to see the Caps move on, it's the Rangers, and I don't think it's going to be that close. I would love to see the Caps put up a fight. I'll probably be at Game 4, but I just don't think they have what it takes to take down the team that won the President's Trophy, has a good bit of playoff experience at this point, and just has a ridiculous amount of depth. So I am taking the Rangers over the Capitals. And then the final first-round series here, the Hurricanes taking on the Islanders. This is another one that I was like, maybe I go with the upset here. But the more I think about it, this Carolina team is so loaded. It is ridiculous. I was trying to talk myself into like, oh, the Islanders have the better goaltending in Sorokin and Varlamov, and they play a very strong defensive game. They are really capable of locking it down. Excuse me, yada yada yada. All the while, the Carolina Hurricanes are just as capable of doing all of that, and they have 4 lines that will just beat the ever living crap out of you the entire game. I mean, at the deadline, they pick up one of the more proverbial playoff players of this generation. I mean, Jake Ensel in the playoffs with the Penguins, I get that, but has been fantastic. Like a point per game, like just goes bananas every single year that he gets in. And they're adding that to a team that already has Teravainen, Aho, Svechnikov, Natchez, Jarvis. Like the defense is ridiculous. Slavin, Orlov, like all of these pieces for the Canes. Then you have Freddie Anderson and Pyotr Kochetkov behind them. Obviously, I think the Islanders still have the edge in goal, but that's really the only place they have the advantage. I think this one goes to the Hurricanes. I don't think it's overly close. I think it probably goes 6. I could see it stretching 7 if the goalies for the Islanders are phenomenal, but I think the Hurricanes are going to take care of business in this one. Caps Rangers. I honestly think this probably ends in 4. I mean, I would love to see Charlie Lindgren still a game, but I think the Rangers. I think the only thing the Caps have the edge in, if you look at their stats comparatively, is like block shots. The Rangers are faster, they score more, they keep the puck out of their net more. Um, it, everything the Rangers do is better than Washington. I don't see a world where Washington A wins the series and B I don't know if they win a game. So Rangers in 4 here, Bruins Leafs. It's 7. It has to be 7, right? That's the only correct answer in this one. And then Florida and Tampa Bay. I think this one probably goes 7-2. It's going to be tight as much as I gassed up Florida and how good they are and how built for the playoffs they are. Tampa's still Tampa Bay. They're going to squeak out some wins. Their offense is still very, very strong. I just think they're going to have some more trouble keeping the puck out of their net than in years past. So moving into the second round, all these series are going to be incredible if I manage to get this right, which I know I won't. But Dallas taking on Winnipeg. We're going to bounce back from the left to the right again. This is a tough series to call. I mean, if Winnipeg gets by the Avs, that means a lot of stuff has gone right for them. Connor Hellebuck's playing well. Their offense is kicking into high gear. And for Dallas, the same can kind of be said. Jake Ottinger will have had a good series to get them past Winnipeg. The offense will have to be clicking. But at the end of the day, I think the Stars are just such a deep team. They have so many guys that can bury the biscuit. Their defense is really good. And again, if they get to this point, Jake Ottinger will have been playing pretty strong. So I think this probably marks the end of the line for Connor Hellebuck and the Winnipeg Jets. If this is the matchup, I do have the Dallas Stars here over the Jets. The Canucks and the Oilers. This would be a fantastic series to watch. I mean, Canadian hockey fans all over will be drooling for this. A lot of star power. 2 goalies that have played pretty well throughout the year. I mean, Demko obviously has the edge over Stuart Skinner, but then we have McDavid versus Pedersen, Miller versus Draisaitl, Lindholm, an ex-Calgary Flame taking on the Edmonton Oilers. So a lot of storylines there, but at the end of the day, I think the Oilers are probably going to have a pretty sour taste in their mouth after last year's effort, and I do think they'll be able to overpower this Canucks team. They've been playing with great structure all year. I just don't know if it's going to be enough to slow down McDavid, Draisaitl, and the like. So I have Edmonton taking down Vancouver in that one. Back out east, a rematch of the second round from last year between Florida and Toronto, and unfortunately for you Leafs fans, I think it goes the same way. I don't know that it ends in 5 this time around, but I really, really like this Florida team a lot this year. And again, just built so heavily. They're built for the playoffs. They have a ton of guys that will just wear you down every single night, and then they have the firepower on top of it. And at the end of everything, they still have Sergei Bobrovsky, who, again, historically has had some times where he's been inconsistent. Last year was not inconsistent in the slightest once we got to the postseason. So I like Florida over Toronto if we get here. I think, again, it'll be a tighter series than it was last year, but I still don't quite think the Leafs have what it takes to get through this team. And then in the Metro, the Hurricanes taking on the Rangers. This one would be another fantastic one. Um, I don't even know where to begin with this. I mean, both teams have so much depth offensively, are so good defensively. Freddie Anderson at the end of this year has been phenomenal. Igor Shesterkin, I badgered about how good he's been in the playoffs. This is a really tough one to call, but I think I probably go with the Hurricanes. I mean, a kind of similar story here to the Panthers. They have a lot of guys willing to get into the dirty areas. Their defense is built, in my opinion, a little more soundly than the Rangers, and I even like their offensive depth a little bit more, even though they don't have a guy having an absolutely bonker season like an Artemi Panarin. I think they just have enough guys up front that can get it done. They can roll 4 lines probably a little bit better than the Rangers can, and for that reason, I have the Canes taking down the Blue Shirts in the second round. On to the conference finals. A rematch out east of last year's and a really, really interesting matchup out west. I mean, full firepower versus a team that just rolls 4 lines all day. Um, and I don't even know who I'd pick to win this one, man. I mean, Dallas, again, I like their depth a lot. but I just don't know if McDavid's going to be stopped this year. Like, he has a lot more support, I think, than he has in years past. Stuart Skinner, again, if we get to this point, Stuart Skinner will have kind of avenged the demons he had chasing him down last year in the playoffs, where he did not look that great. But the same can kind of be said for Jake Ottinger, and obviously there's quite a bridge there between Ottinger and Stuart Skinner. I don't know, man. This is tough. I think I probably have to go with the Stars. The Stars are, again, just built so completely. The only real issue I see with this team is the lack of like true defensive depth, and even that is really, really nitpicking. And if they can get the offense going, I think they're going to do a good job managing kind of the run and gun from Edmonton. And I think the Oilers are just going to have a tough time managing the game the way that a team like Dallas is going to be able to. So I think for me, Dallas probably makes it out of the West and into the Cup final and then out East. Again, a rematch of last year's Western Conference final that was a 4-game sweep from Florida, but very much did not feel that way. Um, I think this is probably the year the Canes get out of it. I mean, they were such a good team prior to the deadline. They get to the deadline, they add two huge names. They get Anderson back. He's been phenomenal. And now I don't know if there's a team out east that can stop them. I know they didn't finish first, but this is the team that I like far and away the most out of the Eastern Conference. And then we get to the final, the Stars and the Carolina Hurricanes. Another really tough one to call, in my opinion. The two deepest teams in this playoff. Um, really similar stories all across the board. I mean, you could nitpick on the Carolina Hurricanes' defensive depth. You can nitpick Dallas's defensive depth. They both have four ridiculous lines up front. And I mean, the goalies, it's kind of the same story. Like, if we get to this point, they will both have been playing very, very well. And it's so hard to pick a difference here between these two teams. Um, I think the major difference probably comes down to motivation. Carolina has been in the Eastern Conference Finals a lot, 3 years in a row, and have lost all three times. I think if they find their way through and get to the Cup final, they're going to punch their ticket, and I think they would be able to get it done. So, my Stanley Cup champion this year is the Carolina Hurricanes. Total number of goals. This would be a low scoring series. Probably goes the distance, though. So, maybe 5.5 goals a game. We'll go 37 goals. Why not? There we go. Bracket submitted. So that's it for my bracket. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. This is going to be one of, I hope, the more interesting playoffs we've seen in a long, long time. I mean, there's really only a couple series where there's a heavy, heavy favorite that would be like completely shocking if a team comes out of the series that's the underdog. Whereas in years past, I feel like there's 3 or 4 usually of those series in the first round. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I am super stoked for this to get started tomorrow. I can't wait to dive into these games with you guys. So thanks as always for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe as well. It is free, and we will see you guys tomorrow for our first playoff recap. We'll talk to you then.